Oh, really? I think you're. Yeah.
So is it something we okay, folks, it's 10 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Calling to order the third quarter meeting of the St. Joseph River Basin Commission for 2021. And right off the bat, I'm going to turn it over to you for roll call and introductions.
Problem. I just noticed that my slides are silent. Thank you. I got the wrong version. I don't know for a second. Let's see. No, it's the right one. My bad, everybody. Sorry. Apparently, I didn't change the first slide. So, first of all, my name is Matt Mearsman. I am technically an employee of MACOG, the Michigan Area Council of Governments, but I serve as the director of the St. Joe River Basin Commission. And I've got a few folks with me here from MACOG. First, Kate Barrett is over here on my left. Kate is working with us as an aquatic ecologist now. And then Ashley Matthews, if you could wave your hand, is the new administrative assistant at MACOG. So we'll have someone helping with the minutes that's here with me, which I greatly appreciate. So before we do our roll call, I just want to give a very brief introduction to the commission, why we're formed, what we're all about. This map that you're seeing now, it's basically 15 counties between Indiana and Michigan, 5,000 square miles of land that drains to the St. Joe River, and we've got representation from the entire Indiana portion. Our mission is to work across the whole basin. And the idea is if we're going to solve any of our water issues, like water quality or water quantity, we have to look at the land that's draining to the river and deal with what's going on there, even more so than working in the river or lake itself. So we were created in the 1980s to address water quality issues, more recently expanded to also address flood mitigation. There's a number of ways in which we go about doing that, but the primary function or purpose of this the St. Joe River Basin Commission is to provide a forum for the discussion, study, and evaluation of the water resources themselves. And the other big thing is bringing us all together in one room. There's a lot of different hands involved in water, from septic permits to agricultural drainage ditches to stormwater systems and everything else in between. So we've got a very diverse representation. I'm going to do a roll call of all these folks, but just so you all know, from each of the 6 counties in Indiana, we've got the mayor of the largest city, county commissioner representative, the health officer, county surveyor, representative of soil and water, as well as the DNR commission. So I'm going to go over first just some real quick instructions. We don't actually have anybody attending. No one requested a virtual. Actually, one person said they might, but they didn't want to be the only one to force a roll call vote on everything for those of you who were here last time. So they said they would tune into the live stream. So I think there's a couple of our members that are tuning in via the live stream today. But really important part is for all of us here, make sure that we state your name when you're making motions. Ashley's new, she doesn't know everybody yet. And then when we try to go back with the recording, it's really helpful if you can state your name when you make the motion. I think that's it. We will be able to use consensus voting today since we don't have anybody attending virtually. So that is welcome news. Okay, for our roll call, I'm going to go down through each county. I'll have a slide up for each county, but basically I'm going to kind of call it by department. And if you are here, if you could state your name, your title and affiliation, and if you are representing someone else, if you're a proxy on the commission, please also let us know that. So first of all, Elkhart County, is there anybody here from the city of Elkhart?
And there is Dara Deegan, I'm the aquatic biologist for the city of Elkhart. There's a lot of persons from the city for the River Basin Commission, also serving as chairman.
Thanks, Dara. How about from the county commissioners?
Brad Rogers, under county commissioner.
Thanks, Brad. Health department?
Bill Hartson, Elkhart County Health Department on-site program supervisor, and health officer representative, Dr. Bethany Wade.
Thank you. Surveyor's office?
Bill Barker, Elkhart County Surveyor.
And how about Soil and Water is Jim?
He'll be here.
Okay, so we've got some reps from Soil and Water, but not voting members. Thank you, guys. Okay, so for Kosciuszko County, Town of Syracuse, I believe I saw Larry. How about County Commissioners?
John Roberts, representing County Commissioners.
Thanks, John. How about Health Department? Wow. And Surveyor's Office?
Jim Moyer, Kosciuszko County Surveyor's Office, representing Michael Kissinger.
Thanks, Jim. And Soil and Water?
Jewel Wise, Board Supervisor for Kosciuszko County Soil and Water.
Great, thank you, Jewel. Okay, for LaGrange County, anybody from the town of LaGrange? Ray Ruger, President, Town Council. That's right. How about from the county?
SJRBC County Health Department, serving as proxy for the home officer litigation.
Super. And I know the folks from the Surveyor's Office said they would be able to make it, as well as Soil and Water. Let's see here. Let me go to Noble County. Anybody from the city of Kendallville? Here. How about County Commissioners?
In the past.
Thanks, Mia. Health Officer, Health Department? Jason today. Randy, the surveyor, said he wouldn't be able to be here. How about Soil and Water? Okay. St. Joe County, City of South Bend. He would be here. How about City of Mishawaka? No. Adam Bowden, the mayor's representative, just had a baby. So congratulations to Adam if you're out there listening. County Commissioners, I didn't see Commissioner Peter. How about Health Department? Soil and Water, Sarah Longenecker, she said she would be able to make it. Okay, so we don't have any St. Joe County reps today. Last but not least, Steuben County, from the city of Angola.
Chris Thomas, MS4 Coordinator, representing Mayor Richard Pittman.
Thank you, Chris. Commissioner Lickey said she wouldn't be able to be here. How about from the Health Department?
Alicia Walsh, representing Dr. Ted Christman. I'm the administrator of the Health Department, and I'm also the secretary of the St. Joe District.
Thanks, Alicia. How about the Surveyor's Office? Okay. But how about Soil and Water?
Janelle Myers, Steuben County Soil and Water Conservation District. I'm the administrative coordinator.
Thanks, Janelle. We also have a representative from the Indiana DNR on our commission, but Rod said he wouldn't be able to be here more than likely. So we did have one person join us. I will go back. Elkhart County Soil and Water, Jim Hess, here. Thanks, Jim. Super. All right, we have a quorum for sure, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Matt. Before we move on with the agenda, I just wanted to just discuss 3 quick formalities really quickly, and most of these were brought up at last meeting. If you weren't at the last meeting, this is new to you, but if you are, this is basically review. Matt had brought it up initially. If we do have a virtual component of our meeting, which we don't have today, fortunately, but if we do going forward, we'll do roll call votes. It's a tedious process for up to 32 people potentially saying their name or saying yea or nay. Fortunately, we don't have that today. The second item is, you'll notice on the agenda, we have a bullet that says consent agenda. Moving forward, we're going to use this consent agenda, which is essentially taking care of all regular business items like minutes, claims, financial report under one vote. This was brought up just because of that whole roll call vote issue and trying to streamline things. If someone does have an issue and wants to pull one of those items out for an individual, do that. But going forward, we'll be using that approach. And all those items will be discussed thoroughly by Matt, like they typically would. They'll just follow under one vote. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was a few meetings ago, we had a member of the commission express an interest in having people make a motion and a second, but do it from different counties, if that makes sense. So I guess the idea is there to create broad support across the basin, so not one area is voting on an issue, if that makes sense. So going forward, we'll ask that, we'll try and direct it so that the people making the motion are different from the people making the second. I was thinking maybe the best way to do that is when you're making your motion and your second, if you could just state your name, like Matt mentioned before, but also your affiliation. That will help prompt the person making the second. All right. I apologize for that. With that, we're going to move on and jump into the consent agenda, and then I'll let you take it over from here.
Okay, so the first item on the consent agenda is our approval of minutes. I want to thank Ashley. She got indoctrinated real quick when she started to make up just a couple weeks ago. I haven't tackled the minutes from our last meeting. I sent those around to everybody with the meeting materials, and hopefully you've had a chance to check them out. I thought they looked great, but I'd be happy to incorporate any comments or edits anyone might have. Any questions or notes on the minutes? Now I'm going to move on to the next item. Next item on the consent agenda is our financial report. And this I also, as I circulated all these materials together. But the first statement that I want to talk about is our statement of activities, which is essentially from the one statement. Just a couple of notes on this one. This is our fiscal year end. Our fiscal year end is June 30th, and so we're always a quarter in arrears at these meetings, and we ended in good shape. The ones I wanted to kind of call attention is several are notated with a note B on there, which is interest, bank service fees, as well as travel expenses were all reduced due to the pandemic being. So our fiscal year, we definitely had a lot of that stuff early that kind of slowed things down. And so the other thing was item C, several of the special project expenses were limited just due to timing and opportunity. And then you'll notice under additional NACOG staff, the expenses were a bit lower, and that was due to the delayed hiring of Kate, actually. And then the last thing was just under outreach and education, that expenses were reduced there due to the virtual format of the annual symposium. So that's all I had in the way of notes on the financial statement of activities. Anybody have any questions about that one? Now, the next one in your packet is our balance sheet, basically statement of assets. We're in good shape. The number to pay attention to here is our total fund balance, which is up to $300,000. The total cash on this statement is associated with register balance, so I also included the bank statement in your packet. We don't have any unclear checks, so the total cash matches the bank statement that's in your packet and the reconciliation report. We did have two receivables. State of Indiana, something happened with our quarterly payments, and they got behind where we didn't receive it by the end of the period, even though it had been invoiced. So that's under receivables. And then the city of Kendallville actually got us our payment. They made the payment within the fiscal year, but it wasn't received until July 1st, basically. So we have the city of Kendallville on there as a receivable. But otherwise, nothing unusual about that. Did anybody have any question about the balance sheet? Okay. The last financial statement in your packet is the cash flow. Unlike the other two, this one's on a cash basis, so up to 630 in this case. And basically, the state funds, you'll notice, are lower on there for the very reason I mentioned. They're about 22,000 down, but that did come in July or August. Actually not that until, but it has been received. And then same thing with City of Kendallville, so I got that highlighted up there. It still shows 0 because it hadn't been received by 6:30, but it is there now. So those are the only two items that I had on the cash statement. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, now I'm going to move into the last thing on the consent agenda, which is the approval of claims. Sent around that cover form that you see on the screen now. As well as the 3 invoices from MACOG for 3 months worth of our services. And then we've got the attorney fees. I saw Randy here somewhere. There she is. So pretty much just routine, nothing unusual on those. Any questions about claims or invoices? If not, that wraps up the consent agenda, and that does require action.
I submitted to approve.
That was Anita Hess from Noble County.
Thanks, Anita.
Second, Ray Hoover, Brandon.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. We're going to move into old business on the agenda, with the first item being existing project updates.
I did see that we had at least one, maybe two members join us since I did roll call. If you're a member of the commission and you joined, there he is. Surveyor Mike Ruff is here from Steuben County. Anybody else was that in? Thank you. Sorry. Sure. Okay, so the first item under old business is our existing projects. This basically encompasses a lot of the work that we do. I just want to touch on a couple of them. And I always think it's important to note that these projects are only possible because of the support from our members, which covers the cost of basic operations, and lets us use the state funds to do these kinds of projects. So first one that I want to talk about is our urban tree canopy project. This is something we did in 6 communities in the basin, 3 on the Indiana side and 3 on the Michigan side. Working with them to determine the best places to plant trees to take stormwater up, which can have cost savings on your stormwater system, as well as improving livability of the community, all kinds of good things. We are almost wrapped up with that. We've got one more meeting scheduled for September 20th with the town of Syracuse, and several of the communities that we already got the trees in the ground. And you know, this has been a good project. This was funded with Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding. The town of Angola, who's here today, was one of the communities we worked with, as well as town of Syracuse. I say town of Angola, city of Angola. Anyway, we're almost wrapped up with that, but we do have another sort of forestry related item on the agenda later, which might have an opportunity to keep some of this work going. I do think some of the communities in working on this project have kind of done some stuff that they wouldn't have done otherwise, looking forward and thinking about their tree program. So it's been a good one to work on. Does anybody have any questions about the tree canopy analysis? Okay. The other project that I want to bring up, done quite a bit of work on this in this quarter, and that's our drainage project. Several of you guys have heard me talk about this a lot. We're working mostly with the surveyor's office in LaGrange County. But basically, for those of you who are not in the agricultural drainage world, we've got a ton of regulated drains out there. That map left, which you can just barely see, shows that I've calculated it out to be over 4,000 miles of regulated drains in the basin as a whole. It's something like 75% of our waterways are managed as regulated drains. So this is a big part of our basin. It's really important. And what we've been trying to do with this project is to basically create an incentive for private landowners to store water in them as much as possible, and improve fairness with the apportionment process. So all these drains are paid for by the folks who drain to them. So the watershed approach to funding drainage maintenance and improvement. And so we've been working with the town of LaGrange to look at things like land cover and soil type to determine how much per acre each landowner pays in those watersheds. Have been down to Kosciuszko and talked to those folks down there. And then beyond the actual apportionment itself, I've also been helping LaGrange County with some of the kind of administrative stuff around the streamlining the process of when, our surveyors know this stuff, but when you determine a new maintenance fee or you set a new rate for one of these drains, you got to notify all the landowners. And some of these ones, like the one I'm showing up on the slide, there's thousands of landowners who drain to one of these drains. They all legally required to get public notice. And so with this approach, it's the rate changes per acre, and you got to tell that person exactly what they're paying. And so we've been working with them just to incorporate a basic mail merge process to automate the sending of those letters. So I know that they've appreciated that help. I'll be out there in October for the next public hearing on one of the drains that we're working with. So that's about all I wanted to share on that one. Does anybody have any questions about the drainage project? All right. That wraps up my existing projects. The next item, I actually want to turn over to Kate to talk about our water monitoring program. And Kate, I don't know if you need to swap seats. Sure. You can use it down there. Yes.
Great, good morning, everyone. So I briefly just want to touch on our updates on our new water monitoring program. And so we did introduce this program at the last board meeting in June, and we were still in the process of scoping out sites. So we've actually selected sites. And these are, we have 12 sites in small streams and tributaries throughout Indiana and Michigan sides of the basin. And we are in the process right now of retrieving samples from all 12 of these sites. Before I go forward and forget, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Dara for really being instrumental in training me on all the methodologies and being a really good mentor for me to get into these streams. So would not be possible without their support. So thank you.
While you got that map, if I could just tell one thing for those, and I know you don't have anybody from St. Joe County today, but if there's someone watching on the live stream, it's important to know as well as Elkhart, to be honest. The western portion of the basin looks like we're missing sites over there, but that's because the program that Dara manages with the city of South Bend and the city of Elkhart really densely samples that sort of downstream portion of the basin. So we really did try to focus our efforts upstream from the big urbanized area.
Absolutely. So getting that more spatial coverage and get some spatial, this will be a long-term program, so look at the spatial component and kind of the story to tell over time how these different sites are doing. And I also want to thank Ashley Matthews as well for helping me out in the field. We're actually going to be heading out to Del Church after this meeting to sample North Country. And so just a little bit more. Back in July, we set out these samplers. See on the left in that image, there's a cinder block with these kind of like blocks on them, and those are basically they act as an artificial substrate to attract macroinvertebrates that we then retrieve that can tell us something about the water quality and maybe certain stressors or impacts of what's going on. And then the image on the right is our reference site. That's Mill Creek up in Michigan. Really nice site. And so just we're in the process of retrieving samples. We will soon be handing them over to the Midwest University Institute for ID. I just want to show a couple of highlights from the metrics. It's hard to see on that log, the picture on the left, that's a how really those critters are really good indicators of water quality. And it's, actually, when I was on training with Dara, that was in Christiana Creek, I think. And then when Ashley and I were at that little we got a pretty good up close event for him. And this is just what samples look like when we treat them. They become covered with algae, and it's hard to see that they're basically just crawling with life. And so it's really exciting to actually see, okay, we're going to have some information in probably a few months, some data on what's going on in these sites. And in the meantime, while we're also surveying the biological communities within these sites, I'll be making another trip out to these 12 locations to collect additional samples to look at the elemental analysis of carbon and nitrogen within the major groups of macroinvertebrates from these streams, to look at the resources supporting them and looking at potential nutrient and sediment impacts on these streams. So we're looking forward to collaborating with some researchers at Notre Dame, and that will allow us to have really nicely free access to high-tech instrumentation, so we can actually perform this analysis and kind of complement the biodiversity aspect. And then once we have the samples analyzed, when MBI identifies everything, and once we have the stable isotope analysis, we'll hopefully generate some food web models and kind of metrics of water quality. So written reports, more presentations at future board meetings and conferences. Hopefully, Indiana Academy of Sciences, which actually helps fund this research, one called database to curate these data, like help with maybe even a story map for these sites to help us some community engagement. And again, we really envision this monitoring, and this is just a gift that, my hubby put together, and we're down in Turkey at Wawasi, and see sampling. So, if you see someone with a floppy hat and string, it's most likely me. So, with that, then I think that concludes my segment. But if has any questions or anything, I'm happy to entertain those either now or after. Thank you for your time.
Anybody have any questions for Kate? So as Kate mentioned, we'll be working with the Midwest Biodiversity Institute. They'll be actually analyzing all those samples that she's collected. And I think Dara said their reports usually not till the spring, probably we'll get data that. But it's been a pleasure working with Kate. I just want to say it's you know, she comes here and talks about this really sciencey stuff. You know, some of it's over my head, but she's been there for a lot more than that, you know, and so what you guys see from her here is most of the water monitoring stuff, but she's very interested in the public outreach and telling the story of what's going on in the basin. And so it's been really nice for me to have someone directly there kind of on my team, and so I really appreciate it. All right.
All right, thanks a lot, Kate. We are going to move on the agenda to new business, and the first item under new business is the 2022 meeting schedule.
Yes. All right, folks. So I guess with this, we've been on the same schedule for quite a while, which is the first Thursday in the months of March, June, September, and December. I was able to secure the Schrock Pavilion for all those dates in 2022. It's been our practice to set that schedule at the September meeting, and that way we know at the December meeting what we've got looking forward to next year. Unless someone has a reason to change, like I say, we've got this space reserved the usual time from 10 to noon. Here at the Schrock Pavilion is secured, although we'll be open to discussion, and we do ideally want to take action on setting that meeting schedule. So I've got the dates up here, March 3rd, June 2nd, September 4th, and December 1st, it would be next year. And that's all I've got really on that. Does anybody have?
I was going to say pretty straightforward to me. Any concerns or at all with that schedule? Seems to work pretty well in the past.
Ray, we were able to accept the schedule for 2022.
Thanks, Ray. Tom LaGrange. You have a second?
Alicia Walsh, still be coming.
Thanks, Alicia. We have a motion and a second to approve the 2022 meeting schedule. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thanks a lot. Next item under new business is the Watershed Leadership Academy.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Purdue University has sponsored, they're in their 16th annual now. But a Indiana Watershed Leadership Academy that is sort of, you know, it's not a full credit class, but you do earn a professional certificate. Several of us have participated in that are here. You know, you work on all kinds of, you know, some general leadership issues, but also some kind of technical topics and technology like GIS and what to find the way of online mapping. Anyway, with COVID, that's kind of changed a little bit over the years. And I should say why we're talking about this at our meeting. For those of you who've been here for a while know this, but the St. Joe River Basin Commission has offered financial support to folks who live in the basin, work in the basin, ideally, whether as a volunteer or a professional. We're involved in watershed management to send them to the Watershed Leadership Academy, or at least provide some financial support to help get them there. Last year, we sent one of our members, Martin Franke, you know, Dara has attended, myself, and several others who are here. They just launched this 2022 Academy. Enrollment has now opened, and the coordinator was asking if we still plan on sending some folks from the St. Joe River Basin. And I am hopeful that we can. I would definitely be interested. We budgeted the money to do this again, but I would like to get the commission's support to maybe support 2 individuals, let's say, is what we've got money in our budget for that. And it's what we've done in the past generally. It was supposed to be 2 last year, and then last minute, one of our folks couldn't make it. I just want to say one other thing, and I haven't talked to her at all about this, but I'm hoping that Kate will be interested in going to this, and we always try to send our members when we can, and so this could be a good opportunity for some thermal training as well. That's all I got on it. Enrollment deadline is November 5th, so generally we make the decision at this meeting, and I give 1 or 2 folks that are willing to help kind of review the candidates who apply for some financial assistance, and usually select folks and announce that at the center.
What is the cost on the?
Good question. So we get a little bit of reduced rate. I think it's $750 or something. And I didn't even put that on here. My bad, folks. I've got it in my email. I can go look. But
It's in your 730.
yeah.
So you're looking for approval for to send up to 2 people
Yes.
for this year? Would anyone care to make a motion?
I move we approve, sending 2 people to the Watershed Academy.
Thanks, John.
I'll second.
Even though Barbara doesn't volunteer, John Law from St. Joe County.
Thanks, John.
Matt, that's
Matt doesn't care.
How did I miss you, John? You've been here the whole time. Did I miss you in roll call? Yeah.
That's all right.
Wow.
I'd be offended.
I would too. John Law, St. Joe County, are you here? You're down now. John.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve up to 2 scholarships, I guess, to the Watershed Leadership Academy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Going to move into the forestry grant opportunity.
So I mentioned when we were talking about the tree canopy that we have some more forestry stuff. This is there. So I had some conversations. I maybe even mentioned this at the last meeting because they just started. But the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has provided some funding for the U.S. Forest Service, which comes through the state DNRs for all of the lower Great Lakes states. So think Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, to support their urban forestry efforts. And I was talking to the coordinator, and she approached me, NDNPR's urban forestry, about doing some work to sort of follow up on our urban tree canopy stuff in the way of water quality focused tree work. And basically there's $30,000 in funding available to us that would come through the Indiana DNR, but we need 1-to-1 match. And the project idea that's been discussed that we would be talking about if we go anywhere with this is working with MACOG to actually hire a part-time regional forester. So communities like Goshen and South Bend, larger communities, often have a forester on staff. Many of our smaller communities do not. And the idea would be bringing someone on that can work with some of those smaller communities and anyone really across the basin on forest management plans, private lands, as well as for communities. But with water quality in mind, not only water quality, but water quantity. But thinking about targeting that effort towards sort of a water-focused approach. The thing is, we would need to come up with that match, and basically, I'm interested in this if we can pull it all together, although it's still not clear if we can. But in conversation with MACOG, they have some in-kind match that they can offer on this. And the director there, James, is definitely interested. They've been approached by some of their communities about the need for a regional forester or someone to help them with forestry. And so he's definitely interested in it. And that's important because they would be the one that's actually hiring this person and employing them, although their work would cover the entire St. Joe Basin. Basically, what I'm looking for is, and this is if we can secure the remaining match and this project looks as favorable it does at this point, I'm requesting your support for spending up to $10,000 of our special project funding coming from partner support as well as resource development towards this project if things come together. But that's kind of what I'm looking for, looking at. I guess, does anybody have any questions? I don't know if I explained that well or not, but the idea would be bringing on another part-time person to help with forestry-focused assistance to our members.
They'll be housed in your office?
In the MACOG office, yep. And James is really pushing, we need the right individual to make this work. It's gotta have some technical skills as well as that sort of interest in working in that region.
Is it a 1-year project?
So 18 months is how long we can stretch the funding out. So this would be short term to begin with, at least the funding that we're trying to secure. But the IDNR person was hopeful that there could be some additional funding down the road. And if we can prove that it's useful, I think there could be some additional support from MACOG as well potentially. But at this point, it would just be a 1 to 1.5 year position. So we've got the money in our budget already to kind of offer this. This would be 3 to 1. Basically, we'd be getting 30,000 for putting in 10. MACOG would be contributing a bunch of in-kind, and probably have to come up with some additional match somehow to make it work. But I told them that looking at our budget, the most I could see is 10,000 towards this effort. I'm open to whatever you guys think on this.
Are there any kind of deliverables on taking this grant? I mean, are there certain hours that need to be met in certain communities or anything like that?
Not from the U.S. Forest Services, as far as I can understand, but as we've described it, one of the things would be a strategy and a prioritization, basically, that takes place, and she's got a bunch of potential criteria, like, you know, where impaired stream segments are, where the existing forest canopy is. We would kind of look at what are the most critical areas to work on. I mean, it wouldn't be to the level that we've done in the urban tree canopy project, because that's involved consultants and stuff, but there would be some kind of document that builds on what's already out there in Indiana DNR's urban forestry. So we wouldn't have, as far as I understand, we wouldn't have to check X, Y, and Z box in order to get our 30,000 after we've contributed hours to this project or something.
Okay.
They would have to buy in at the beginning, like U.S. Forest Service and the DNR would buy in at the beginning, and then we should be good.
Who advertises the job and selects the
It would be MACOG.
MACOG? James and you?
Yeah.
And what's MACOG's focus going to be? Is it going to be the smaller regional communities, or I know there are foresters that work for certain large communities, but what would the scope of work be for somebody who just for a year? What would they actually achieve in a year and a half? I guess is what I'm asking.
I don't know the second part of what you asked. The part is exactly what they would achieve. Hopefully, getting some of our communities in a better position, possibly even some private lands conservation that could take place. I know there was a lot of talk about that from Carrie, the IDNR person. But the first part of your question was about, sorry, what would be the organization?
Benefit from a service like this. A position like this, having it.
What would be the benefit of it? Sorry.
Like what size community?
Oh, yeah, my bad. So one thing is, you know, it probably, I'm sure they would be willing to work with a community like Goshen or South Bend that's of a size that already has it, but ideally we'll be focused on small to medium-sized communities like those that we worked with in our tree canopy project, but not just, and this is, I don't remember the question, not just MACOG's region, so not just the western portion of our basin. In order for this funding to be received from Indiana DNR, they have to work across the whole lower Great Lakes basin. So all 6 of our counties would be where their sort of service area was, and then it would be small, medium-sized communities or private landowners as well. Sorry about that.
You answered my question.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on this?
I guess for me, it seems like a good way to leverage some money. It's not that it's $10,000, we're leveraging 30,000. There's an opportunity to help some smaller communities in the basin. I personally would be in favor of this. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Ray, with your town range, I'll make a motion for you.
Thanks, Ray.
That's 10,000 for this project.
Now that I really.
Anita has.
Thanks, Anita. We have a motion and a second to approve up to $10,000 towards this forestry grant opportunity. Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thanks a lot. Okay, next item on our agenda is Noble County flood resilience.
Thanks, Darla. So, those of you who were here at our last meeting, remember that we had some discussion about follow-up to the study that we did in the North Branch of the Elkhart, and since that meeting, we decided to initiate the work on the flood resilience implementation with Christopher Burke. I have entered into that agreement with them, and we will be getting started on that. I'm going to be going down to Noble County for a meeting with Anita and the Board of Commissioners on September 27th. We'll be discussing the next steps in that plan, the formation of a flood resilience planning team, but also since the last meeting, I met with the Maumee River Basin Commission as well as several stakeholders from the West Lakes in particular, but other lakes, and I see a couple of them are here today, to talk about the enforcement of the county's existing floodplain ordinance. A lot of concern down there about floodplain filling that's been taking place that seems to be, in violation of the ordinance that's in place. And so, met with those folks, have been talking about how we approach this, and I really just sort of feel like at this point, one of the best things we can do, or the primary purpose of this flood resilience planning that we are starting, is trying to help the local government officials there understanding, not their ordinance per se, but how they're not doing the residents any favor if and when they choose to waive the requirements or not enforce them. And so there's been some changes down there in the way of staffing, and I know that there was some struggles, but I'm hopeful that working together, we can sort of get our ordinance set in a way that we feel good about enforcing what we've got on the books, and if there's something that we don't feel good about, then we need to discuss that. So I will be part of that discussion, and I'm hopeful that this flood resilience planning team effort will be an opportunity to get engaged down there. Anyway, on that, Sheila McKinley from Burke has started reviewing the relevant plans and codes, and will be sort of recruiting folks for the flood resilience planning team, but it's expected to include the county officials, the commissioner, one of the commissioners, surveyor, floodplain administrator, the emergency manager, member of the plan commission, and then whoever would be our economic development, sort of community development kind of person if we got one at the county. Those would be the key members on there. So we'll be engaging in 3 meetings coming up over the next, I don't know, probably nine months or so. The last one will be an implementation checklist of what kind of strategies are things that we can live with or that we feel are good for Noble County, a good fit, and hopefully get those rolling. And even if it's just having a better understanding of what we've already got. So anyway, I just wanted to update folks on that and ask if there's any questions. Great.
With the new legislation that they just passed on wetlands and bill, what can counties do? Do they still have the right to have ordinances and stuff like that, or does the state take over and dictate to them what they can do? Because with this new law, it sure opens up a lot of stuff for Bill, and it's going to make it harder on the person to file versus everything. So.
Yeah, so, I was involved a lot in the talk on that legislation, and a lot of what I heard from the legislators who were pushing for the change was that the local communities could still do this. Like, just because we're moving at the state level doesn't mean you can't do it locally. Practically, though, I don't think that's a really viable solution. Most communities don't have. I mean, we look at it, floodplains have been regulated for a long time. There's way less controversy around the regulation of floodplains than there are wetlands. And even with that, it's difficult to do at a county level. So, I don't know. I'm sure some cities, and I think of cities in particular because of the, the overhead that you got, the kind of personnel that are in place there, you might be able to enforce a local ordinance there. But technically you could have one, as far as I understand, your own local wetland ordinance that superseded the state's. On that, there's been a federal court case just this last week that this was always expected, that on the federal level, we might see a change now. And so there's a chance that a bunch of the wetlands that have lost their state regulated status will now be picked up by an expanded federal program that's actually, in some ways, supposed to be in place now. That this court ruling supposedly rolled us back to like the 90s or something like that, or maybe not that far, but pre-Obama era. So
I don't know if you had a chance to read the LaGrange paper, because I'm sure that's one that sends to you all the time.
I did not.
Senator Sue Glick had a scathing article in there about this new regulation and what it's doing to the whole state of Indiana with this bill policy that these developers are going into right now that are going full bore. And she said that she thought that they were going to try to bring it up again next year. So a year's time could be very devastating to a lot of wetlands and stuff.
Yeah. The concern is she was an incredible ally on things with this and clarifying the distinction. I think there was a lot of momentum came that it was helping ag, but there was a lot of, in her mind, it was development, not the ag side that it was really helping. Thanks. Anybody else have any questions or comments about the floodplain?
Yeah, quick question. Have you heard anything about the wetlands task force?
I have, yeah. I actually was contacted by the governor's office 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and they asked me to be on it, which I accepted. And they said that they expect that, actually now in September, they expected that the first kickoff meeting might take place as soon as this month, or maybe that the announcement will be made. It's going to be up to the chairman to call the first meeting. Didn't announce who that chairman was, but it did say, and I have heard from a couple of other folks who were on the water. Director Joe Schmees was asked to be on there, and I know Jill Hoffman, who was really helpful. She's from the White River Alliance, but was really the leader in drafting a lot of the language that we offered to Senator Glick, as well as Representative Abbott in trying to come up with an alternative for compromise. So that is good news. Hopefully we'll be getting started on that soon, this year. Anybody else have anything on this one?
We're going to move into other business / updates. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to, any projects they're working on or issues they'd like to discuss? All right, hearing none, we're going to move into the director's report.
All right, I'm going to keep this short and sweet, much as I can here. I usually try to utilize the director's report to talk about things that are included in other places on the agenda. So just a few highlights. One, we moved into new offices at NACOG. Kate and I now have our own office at NACOG with quite a bit more room and a window. So we're excited about that.
This one?
Yeah, exactly. Still living out of the box there, but we are doing better than we were in our little cube that we had. So that's been good. I have presented budget requests to 3 of our 6 county commissioners, board of commissioners. It's that time, or actually it was more so in June time when budgets are getting set for the next year. So make the rounds and try to make our case for appropriation for each of our communities. I think it went pretty well. We won't know until a little bit later this year as to what was budgeted for us, but also lots of interviews and presentations. Interviews, local PBS station, WNIT, I don't know how far east it gets, but they had me on talk about the wetlands bill that was passed, and then some of you may have seen they're launching a documentary on the St. Joe River. It will air, I think, next week. The premieres at local communities was last weekend, and so I've got a role in that, and I think I'm on the commercial for it, so some folks were saying they saw me there. Also, NBC News, national news came to town to South Bend, talk about infrastructure projects, and I talked to them about the smart sewers in South Bend and how it allows us to get on the river a lot more. So then, presentations, Katie can join me for a couple. We've been talking to all different kinds of groups. Probably one of the biggest ones was participating in a couple panels at the Indiana Water Summit, where Senator Glick and several of the legislators were down there. Was there. So it was a really good event, and basically I got to share a panel with the directors of the other river basin commissions in Northern Indiana, and I thought it was pretty informative. So the wetlands, there's a wetlands coalition that's kind of been meeting pretty regularly. I'm going to roll in that. I mentioned the wetlands task force appointment has occurred. I guess that's mainly the stuff that I've been working on in the way of highlights. Always reviewing floodway notices, and the commission's copied on all kinds of stuff from DNR and IDEM, and so we'll try to stay on top of that. The only other item I wanted to note was I mentioned at the last meeting, sort of on a personal note, that I was going to be participating in a big canoe race, and some of you who live close to me probably know this or talk to me regularly, but I predicted a podium at our last meeting, and I did. I got the top spot on the podium, broke the record in the process.
Congratulations. That is you in the front of the community.
Yeah, right. And everybody asked me how I did it, and I pointed to that picture and said, that guy in the front right there is about how I did it. I've been doing it a long time, and I've had some good finishes, but man, I had a really good partner this year, and we had high water, got a bunch of rain the day of the race. The race doesn't start till 9 p.m., and it rained all day long. Stopped just in time for the race, and we rode that way 120 miles down the river, and blew the record out of the water by like 4 minutes. It's been in place for like 30 some years. Wow. So had a great time, and one of the reasons I brought it up at the last meeting was to ask for your patience with me as I pulled back. I know I have not been at the drainage board meetings as much as I normally am. I have not been out in the counties a little bit in June and July the way I normally would like to be, and so I'm kind of trying to come back down to earth and get her going again. So hopefully I'll see a lot of you in your neighborhood, in your office or conference room soon. So that is all I have in the way of a director's report.
Thanks, Matt. Next, we're going to move into a presentation from Jack Whitman of the Steuben County Water Availability Study. And I think I'll have you introduce Jack, if that's okay. I do know Jack came and spoke to this board about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, the Indiana Water Availability Study. It's pretty informative stuff, so we're looking forward to it. Turn it over to you, Matt.
All right, thanks, Sarah. I'm going to move on to Jack's way in just 1 second once I get his presentation up. Just need to share it, Jack, so the folks watching the live stream can see what's going on.
Is it down here?
Yep, exactly.
Great. I really appreciate everyone, the chance to meet the commission again. I want to talk about a project that is happening in a part of the basin that we proposed and really describe more in detail what the basin could look at in terms of tying some of the pieces of the puzzle that you've been building over time, the monitoring, the kind of the stormwater pieces. So I'm going to describe this work that's happening and how it fits together and what's happening in the state and why I think that this commission could play a really important role in the state of Indiana. Regional planning is not like some of the other things that are being done by, let's say, a utility, where they're looking just at their utility and how can we get more water. The question in a region is how much water for the region is going to be needed and how much is there available. So there's two parts of this question, is that how much will the basin need for all of its uses, irrigation for agriculture, industrial uses, and the municipal uses, and then there, how much groundwater, how much surface water? Will the effects of pumping the groundwater affect the surface water? It's kind of a larger and more interconnected project or assessment. And also the other thing that at least is important in many areas where there's big seasonal fluctuations in water demand or water availability is when is it available and when is it needed? So do they match up? Do we have enough when we need it? So in the planning region, you're really trying to look at who are the users, who are the people that need the water and use the water, and how has use changed over time? Is there a trend? Are we going in a particular direction? So some parts of the state are adding more irrigation. Some are using less industrial water. Some are growing just municipally. The municipal growth is what's really changing in that area. So every part of the state has its own story, in effect. And is there any infrastructure that really needs to be thought about? And when you're thinking about this, what other infrastructure might be needed? So some of the principles of regional planning is in the riparian eastern United States. Our company Terra works all over the United States, and on the western side of the country, water law is judicial. It's a property right and first in time, first in right, and I own that water. You can own land in the west without owning the water underneath your feet. That's not uncommon. And in reverse, you can own the water without you can have water rights without owning the land. So it's a very, depending on the state, it's a very interesting problem with water rights in the west. But in the east, the only access we have to controlling our water is really collaboration and management. And this kind of room full of people that represent different interests is the way that the eastern U.S. is going to define kind of its water rights. So cooperation is critical if there's going to be any management. And this group already does this. And it's very unusual in the state. It's so interesting to me, who's talking to people around the state, how rare it is that people get in the room, different places, neighboring counties, and talk about the river resource that connects them. So a water planning region needs to share something, some kind of a supply or a source where it's obvious that the reason that we're all here is this one resource and provide that resource. And the regions have to identify, all right, we don't exactly want the same thing, but here's the part that we do want together. We all want this part of what we're after. We have common goals, etc. So the planning region also, in addition to sharing some kind of interest in the resource, they have to share problems. Like, okay, what are we going to do about this? Whatever this is, whether it's stormwater, water quality problems, etc. So I just listed a few. Ideally, there are cities in this region too that kind of force the questions related to utilities and also distributed users like agriculture and industry. In central Indiana, on the right-hand side, a region was identified because simply and only because the utilities in that area began talking to each other 3 years ago. And they said, we want to be a region. We want to be a water supply planning region, they said to the Indiana Finance Authority. Please consider us as a region. So because all the utilities had been meeting in a room for 3 years, they became the first planning region in the state. It's interesting to me because for the first time, they had been thinking about the fact that they were pumping from the same aquifer. And as a consultant who's helping them figure out what to do and where to build, I was constantly trying to get the different utility thing together. So it happened by itself, not by my promotion or suggestion. And because of that, they became the first planning region. And that planning region was defined and forecasts were made for all of the uses in that region. And then the available supplies were identified in that region. So there was kind of the first time the match of the future needs and the available resources. Very interesting work, very interconnected, a lot of different users, etc. So across the state, there are different, you can't see this very well. On the right-hand side, those pie charts are different colors. That's part you can't see very well. In the north, they're a lot green because of all the irrigation in the northern part of the state. And along the Lake County those are really industrial users from the big steel manufacturing. Those huge withdrawals from there had been, so the industrial use dominated there. But if you see the red along the big rivers, that's all energy production. So that's cooling water for power plants, basically. So every part of the state has a characteristic dominant user. And in the middle of the state, it's pretty much blue. And that's all the utilities that are growing around the big city. And so in addition to sharing a resource, it's kind of ideal to share a mix of users in a way, too. If you look at these two maps, these show two different things. The darker blue on the right-hand side, the darker blue, and all the way to yellow goes to where there are larger and larger fractions of all of the population drink from their own well. So in the northern part of the state, many homeowners drink from a well in their yard. And as you go further south, near Bloomington, and when you get further south, hardly anyone does. There's no real aquifer there. It's shale, and so everyone is served by regional water districts that have the water, treat the water, and then send it through long pipelines to the different homeowners and users. And on the left-hand side, those are the service areas of utilities that serve drinking water. And this doesn't show sewer. There's another map that you can show that's sewer and the layout for wastewater. So as you go to the south, you can see these service areas for drinking water overlap. As you go to the north, it's kind of the opposite. Little islands of use, and then in between, its homeowners have their own well. You can, like Pasiaxo County, for example, there's no, if you're in town, great, you can use the local supply. If you're not, it's no big deal to have a well and use that. But the regional planning, the regional water planning regions that have been proposed on the left are just, that map shows about how many of these that would ideally be distributed around the state. And on the right-hand side, it's the basin, the watershed of the St. Joseph River, and it's kind of a fraction of that orange. It's if you went from the corner of the northeastern corner of the state, it's kind of a fraction of that orange panel that's identified there that could be a water supply planning region for the state of Indiana. And upstream of you, we have been talking to Angola, the utility, and they are promoting a proposal that we have made to them to help them identify for their wells and for that region within the basin, how much groundwater is moving where, and how much are the users that are in the basin affecting or altering flows through the basin. So they're trying to look at just groundwater availability, not surface water so much, but we're going to look at both water quality with the State Department of Health helping us, and then water availability for that part of your basin. This is a kind of a piece of your puzzle. There's a flow chart of the process that we would go through. We're going to look at the data, we're going to build models, and we're going to try to help the community and the water users in that area think about what they could achieve. There may be a lot more water than they use, or not. We're going to help figure that out. And in other parts of the state, we are developing for counties their own water availability system. Imagine 60 or 70 wells in each county that provided information about how full the aquifer was all through the year, real time. So instead of having a real-time single USGS well, there can be many and located throughout a county, providing feedback to the users of the water and help them understand and see over time how their use affects the resource. So that's just a cartoon, only meant to show an idea, but that's something that I think is the future, no matter how all of our conversations, these conversations go. That is where it's going, because the tools for doing that are becoming cheaper and cheaper. So we're going to have and be able to get more direct and immediate feedback. And this might be the last slide, or yeah, this is the last slide. This is familiar. This was in Matt's second slide or something like that. This is what you do. So these are the parts of your mission. And the Finance Authority is trying to find groups of people that want to think about this problem. Their funding is available from the State Finance Authority to help with this. So this is a little flip. I'm not asking for anything. I'm informing you that there is money available for some of this activity. And the State Finance Authority is really encouraging, I would say, to any group that might want to pick up the ball and go down this path. And I'm here really just to talk about this. This is what the state is up to. But also I'm trying to promote the idea that this group is more impressive than you will all might imagine to be, because I'm the one that's walking around trying to figure out, can you talk about this topic together? And they don't, a lot of people don't want to talk about it. A resource that they might want to use, but they don't want their neighbors to know as much, or how they're managing or whatever. It's a normal thing, because we haven't talked about this topic here in the state of Indiana. We have a lot more. So I think this group and the commission itself is one of the more ideal organizations to manage this kind of project. And so since we'll be doing some work in the basin, I thought it would be worthwhile for you to know more about what we're up to and what's going on, and to find out if you're interested in this kind of idea here. With that, yeah, questions. And again, that's my contact information. I really appreciate if anybody did the time, but if you have questions, I would like to engage if you have any questions about this.
So, Brady, in this study, is this a study to see how, if I'm listening right, how much water is in our aquifers? And the availability, say we've got too much. Because I know how the state works. IFAs are good to sell off our water. Basin County, if I remember right, has already been approached several different times by the city of Toledo or a developer to pump our aquifer to the big cities in Ohio. Is that IFA's plan to sell off our aquifer water to other places that may not have the water quality that we have? And that's what this study's about?
No, the straight answer is no. In fact, the Finance Authority has looked at a few places along the Ohio River where the aquifer is really just adjacent to the Ohio River itself, where there have been old well fields for ammunition plants in the 40s, and they thought about the ability to pump that water from that very narrow aquifer, less than 2,000 feet wide next to the river, and try to pump that into southern Indiana to help the people in southern Indiana have cheaper water, basically. But there's never been any suggestion. This is actually the reverse. So the region controls the answer to your question, not the state. The state really has no control over water supply like this. There's no, they can't, they have a group, there is currently a law that that the state will look at any interstate waters to see if there's any issues. Like they can't keep flowing into Illinois. On the Illinois side, they would like there to be, more active water quality protection, things like that. So, but that's really a separate thing than what you're describing, which is really selling water. That's not being done. I understand that there's the local governments are naturally, I want to say suspicious or whatever, but about the state, what's the state up to here? Really, because that's the question. What is the state up to? And what I understand the state to be trying to do is to provide the information to use so that you can see the answers and you can decide for yourselves what you think makes sense, as opposed to the state deciding. So as far as I know, absolutely not. But yeah, and utilities are often very involved in this conversation. And this group, it isn't that. It's not a bunch of utilities talking to each other about the next big well or whatever. It's really all the users here. Good question, though. Any other thoughts or questions about what's happening around the state and kind of plugged in? Matt,
I guess I just want to let everybody know that, I crossed paths with Jack a couple times around, actually probably just since the Central Indiana Water Study. I don't think we interacted even before that. And as someone who's been interested in watershed work, let alone leading the commission, when I first saw some of these maps for these regional planning areas that the IFA had proposed, I was a little alarmed because they didn't match our watershed boundary, and I tend to think about that as sort of being the ideal management unit for us to look at. I'm a little biased, but that's, I'm a surface water guy, that's how I tend to think. So I kind of engaged just in that sort of, as the state kind of suggests, hey, maybe we should think about regional planning, sort of saying, hey, wait, we're doing that already, at least we're trying to get it started here, and have been for 20, 30 years. The fact that the water utilities aren't at the table maybe not by statute, but it's certainly something that with the county municipal executives being at the table, they could be. And I guess, knowing a little bit more, I guess I just want to say, I didn't know exactly what Jack was going to be talking to us about today. He's been doing some work in Stu Bend that picked up on what had been done in central Indiana and had some similar issues, so I was immediately interested. And now I'm hearing what you presented. I do wonder about, whether some initiative on our part as a commission could, sort of help our communities be one of these self-created planning regions and actually benefit. I mean, I know from different presentations I've had at Water Summit in particular, that the IFA does have a lot of money for water infrastructure right now. And then, we gotta be one of these regions to really be ranked well so we can secure it. And so I wonder, how well as Jack has done, whether this body could kind of help kick that off and give us a leg up on the others.
As I see it, and I've been having a kind of this version of this conversation for a while with different people in the state. It seems to me like a lot of other aspects of the kind of work we do. This is either the group decides to make these decisions itself, or there will be a region that's somehow that doesn't fit your planning area. I mean, to me, the area, as Matt said, it makes sense that it be the base for all of the reasons that the commission is. So this would just simply add information and insight to all of the deliberations that you have. And I'm not even proposing to do it myself. I'm just saying this is happening. It's not trying to sell a thing here. I'm just trying to inform you about how the state is thinking about this, how it's moving in a direction, and it's happening kind of fast. And the money that's available is available kind of more or less at the moment. This is even the infrastructure piece that Matt mentioned. This is infrastructure. Okay, this kind of work, if you were we're down this path, could be navigated, I think, with the.
When you say this, you mean installation of the monitoring wells?
Yeah, things like this, where the studies and the information, because that would lead to, the way it would be framed is that would lead to a more efficient use of the resource, right? And so that you can build infrastructure more intelligently within your communities. You can figure out how to space agriculture wells from municipal wells, things that are sort of basic. You don't want conflict. These are things that you all want, you don't want conflict, you don't want water quality problems, you don't want to find out that you're developing a resource here and piping it far away over here, just adding to your rates and costs. These are things that this would help you see.
So I tended to think in the past when what was the name of the legislation that was passed that kind of created the need for this reason?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was some legislation though that was saying, look, we're going to require these things in order to get access to this funding. I tend to think of it strictly as water supply infrastructure or stormwater and sewer infrastructure, very gray lines, basically. And opening this up a little bit does, certainly pique my interest more in this space and, infrastructure to understand how the water is moving in the way of monitors and wires and stuff and not to mention if we can help our communities get that correct.
That's right. The other thing that I think that I wanted to say about this is that I think that what's the infrastructure that's usually missing, and I guess this is kind of my earlier comments, is that there's rarely the institutional infrastructure. You have been thinking about this and have met with each other and have some level of trust around the table or knowledge of each other, and that's what's missing. It's not, if you need to build something, everybody can figure out how to build it. But the conversation that this room has about this topic is in our state is unusual. So you have a chance, I think, if you want to go down a path like this and to open up the door to more interesting sort of insights into the resource than you have already. And you have a lot. I mean, I'm impressed. Your agenda was impressive. What you're doing is impressive. All these things that you're working on are really kind of leading edge in some ways. So this is just, I'm here just to talk about that and to encourage you to think about these kinds of ways of looking into the future for this program. Thank you very much.
All right, just one last word on Jack's presentation. It's sort of us thinking about going forward. I do know, and Jim was talking next to me, that so straddling the line, our basin being in Indiana and Michigan, there's already, and being in the Great Lakes, water availability supply is something that's being studied a little bit. So we've got some, thinking of the Michigan Irrigation Association and put wells in and all, but really trying to understand our aquifer here. And, you know, and as I've understood it, is to make sure that Arizona doesn't get a hold of our water. You know, the part is make sure that we are managing our resource so that by the Great Lakes Compact, someone can't say, hey, you guys are using it willy-nilly, it should be for everybody. And so this is consistent with that.
It is. In fact, that's, I think, a really important point. I was going to show a slide about that. You know, Todd Feaster's group has done a lot of those installation of those monitoring wells. That could be, that's another argument for saying, we've got this. We've got a lot of information. We can add to that in places where the municipalities would want to complement that. So you have data, you have collaboration, and you have an institution already established to have this conversation. That is, I mean, nowhere else in the state can you point at that. So
that's really good stuff.
Yep.
Thanks, Jack.
Yep.
Can I ask Jack what the next potential steps would be, like if the commission was interested in pursuing this a little bit more, see if it fits with our mission on quantity at least. But if the commission was interested, like, is there be a conversation with Matt and the IFA or something, and is it direct things, or would it be,
that's where it would start.
Okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda, and our last item, is items from the floor. Any announcements? Projects that are going on. Matt, do you have any announcements?
Thanks so much that I didn't cover there.
Anyone else? Any announcements?
I guess what I would say is it's incredible turnout that we've got today, both from members as well as the audience. And I felt at times like, you know, we've gone long on these meetings before. Everybody's pretty quiet today, not a lot of questions or anything. And I hope that's a good thing. Everybody's ready to get going. That's all good. But I want you to feel comfortable to ask, and I'm always available outside of these meetings as well. And I just really appreciate all your interest. I think what Jack said is true. We're unique, and we've been coming together since I've been here. The turnout is really encouraging. And so I appreciate you guys making the trip, for those of you who have to travel here, and just having the interest in being a part of this. Greatly appreciate it.
All right, thanks, folks. No one else? All right. So I guess I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Thanks, Ray. Second. John, one second. Sure. Thanks, John. No, second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll be back here, God willing, on December 2nd. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, that's there. Some people.